In the news tonight, the Supreme Commander joins officers at a joint military drill by Jordanian and German forces. The European Union election observers say Jordan's parliamentary polls are well administered and inclusive. And Syrian government forces advance further into eastern Aleppo, where the UN warns food supplies are running low. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty the King, the Supreme Commander of the Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army, attended a joint exercise carried out by Army units and German forces. Upon arrival at the site, His Majesty, who was accompanied by His Royal Highness Prince Faisal and Prince Hashim, was greeted by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Lieutenant General Mahmoud Frihat, and the Commander of the Joint Special Operations. The exercise, dubbed Black Star and intended to enhance military cooperation between Jordan and Germany, included hostage-freeing raids, combat in urban areas, and anti-terrorism operations. The Supreme Commander and senior officers present at the site expressed their satisfaction with the level of planning and coordination between the various units. Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki received Chief of the EU Election Observation Mission Joe Lennon, who presented to him the mission's final report on the September 20 parliamentary elections. The Prime Minister said Jordan is proud to hold the polls that reflected Jordan's ongoing reform process. The elections were fair and transparent and were held without the government's interference, Mulki said. The government's role, he added, was only to provide the support requested by the Independent Election Commission. The Prime Minister stressed the participatory approach with the lower house to address challenges, adding that the formation of parliamentary blocs reflects the lawmakers' seriousness about institutional work. Senate President Faisal Faiz also said upon receiving the report that political and socio-economic reform is an irreversible process, as Jordan has the political will to proceed along this path. He said that despite the regional conflicts and crises, Jordan held the elections on due date as a reaffirmation that the reform process is on course. The final report concluded that the parliamentary polls were well administrated, inclusive and generally peaceful. Lennon, the senior EU observer, told a press conference the final report offers a comprehensive assessment of the elections.
Now, all in all, I think these parliamentary elections on the 20th of September have been a success. They have been well administrated and inclusive. And the election day itself has been peaceful and calm. And I think we have to commend to the people of Jordan to participate in these parliamentary elections. Nevertheless, nothing is as good as it cannot be improved, and of course we found some elements of further improvement in the political reform process of this country. And the final report, as I told you, offers a lot of recommendations to the authorities here in Jordan, to the political parties, to the civil society. And we hope that these improvements and recommendations will be discussed and step by step as well implemented.
A Royal Air Force F-16 jet crashed as it tried to take off while on a training mission, killing the pilot. A source at the General Command of the Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army said the fighter jet crashed due to a technical failure. It identified the pilot as Major Ayed Ahmed Ad-Daja. Syrian government forces and their allies advanced into another rebel-held part of eastern Aleppo as the army drew closer to opposition-held parts of the old city. Rebels appeared on the verge of being driven from a Sha'ar neighborhood after new advances by Syrian government forces yesterday. But rebels said they had mounted a counter-attack today and were recovering ground in some areas. Also today, the Russian government said it would start talks with Washington on a rebel withdrawal from Aleppo this week. Russian-backed Syrian forces fought to seize more territory from rebels who are struggling to avoid a major defeat. Meantime, the United Nations Chief of Humanitarian Affairs said food supplies are running critically low for more than 200,000 besieged people in eastern Aleppo. Rebel groups have reiterated calls for humanitarian corridors to be opened for the delivery of food and medicine and the evacuation of the wounded.
No stone has been left unturned, seeking to make sure we get the chance to supply the life-saving needs of the people in eastern Aleppo as we speak. We continue, therefore, to have an ongoing dialogue of putting forward plans and all the rest of it for making sure we have safe, unimpeded access with loaded trucks to be able to get in. Wheeled convoys are always, by far, the most important way of getting the necessary volumes and immediacy and of food and medicines and treatments in.
In Idlib, southwest of Aleppo, airstrikes killed at least 73 people in rebel-held Idlib province, including 38 in the city of Ma'arat al-Nu'man. Russian warplanes and Syrian military jets and helicopters have been conducting heavy strikes for months against rebels in Idlib. Rebels have previously tried to get help and supplies to fellow rebels in Aleppo from Idlib. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the death toll in Ma'arat al-Nu'man included 5 children and 6 members of a single family. The monitoring group said the bombardment included barrel bombs, improvised ordnance made from oil drums filled with explosives, and dropped from helicopters. Meanwhile, a Russian Su-33 warplane crashed while landing on the Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean. And this just in, Russia and China vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that would have demanded a 7-day truce in Aleppo, with Russia arguing it would allow rebels to regroup and that time was needed for talks between Washington and Moscow. It was the 6th time Russia has vetoed a Security Council resolution on Syria since 2011 and the 5th time China has blocked action. Venezuela also voted against the resolution drafted by New Zealand, Egypt and Spain, while Angola abstained. The remaining 11 council members voted in favor. Western-backed Iraqi forces have begun shelling parts of West Mosul in preparation for a new front in a campaign to drive Daesh from the city. Police forces stationed a few kilometers south of Mosul on the west bank of the Tigris River that divides the city have said they aim to advance towards the airport on the southwestern edge. Military commanders hope that by opening a second front within the city, they can increase pressure on the few thousand militants. They said they will continue operations to liberate the remaining villages before heading to Hawija. Daesh has deployed suicide bombers, snipers and militant cells against elite Iraqi troops in eastern districts. Some 100,000 Iraqi soldiers, security forces, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters and mainly Shiite paramilitary forces are participating in the assault. A US-led international military coalition is providing air and ground support. Libyan forces said they were close to securing a final patch of land where Daesh terrorists have been holding out in the stronghold of Sirt, though there were continued skirmishes. Misrata-led forces launched early today a final offensive to eradicate Daesh remnants in Giza Bahriya neighborhood, killing 34 of the terrorists, while 30 others surrendered, including at least 2 senior commanders. More than 50 children and dozens of women who were held captive by the terrorist group were freed and taken to a hospital near Misrata. A spokesman for the Misrata brigades said the Misrata-led forces now control all of Sirt's Giza Bahriya and are still advancing in the area. Daesh took over Sirt in early 2015. Italian President Sergio Mattarella told Prime Minister Matteo Renzi to put his planned resignation on hold until Parliament had approved the 2017 budget, which could be done as early as Friday. The President told him he should stay in place until the budget was passed to prevent emergency funding rules from kicking on January 1st. Renzi was set to resign today after suffering a crushing defeat in a referendum over constitutional reform. The no vote won an overwhelming 59.1% of the vote. The announcement of his resignation sent the euro lower and jolted stock and bond markets on concerns that early elections could follow. Renzi's decision to quit deals a blow to the European Union, already reeling from multiple crises and struggling to overcome anti-establishment forces. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she was saddened by Renzi's defeat in a referendum that she supported. Here's more.
Italy's Prime Minister Matteo Renzi announced his resignation when it became clear he was losing a referendum on constitutional reform.
Tomorrow I will call a cabinet meeting and I will thank my colleagues for an extraordinary adventure. It's been a united, strong and compact team. I will then go to the presidential palace where I will tender my resignation to the president.
Campaigners who opposed his plans for reform were celebrating on Sunday. Renzi said his reforms would have given Italy greater political stability. Opponents said they put at risk vital democratic checks and balances. Renzi's resignation could open the door to early elections next year. That raises the possibility of a win by the anti-Euro five-star movement, which wants a referendum on Italy's membership of the single currency.
Staying in European politics, French Prime Minister Manuel Valls entered the race to be the socialist candidate for next year's presidential election. He said he was quitting the government to focus on campaigning. Opinion polls bill the 54-year-old Valls as favorite to win his party's nomination in late January primaries. But the centrist, with a business-friendly stance on economic policies, combined with a reputation as a hardliner on law and order, will face stiff competition from party rivals. The Prime Minister had made no secret of his desire to seek the socialist ticket, and President François Hollande's decision not to run for a second mandate opened the way for him. The death toll from a huge fire that tore through a converted warehouse in Oakland, California during a dance party has risen to 36. 11 of the victims have been identified so far. With many of the victims burned beyond recognition, families have been asked to preserve items that might contain their DNA to help identification. The cause of the blaze, which erupted on Friday in a two-story loft building, has yet to be determined. By this morning, only 35 to 40% of the building had been searched. The blaze was the deadliest in the U.S. in more than a decade. South African Jordy Smith rode his way to a win at the Vans World Cup of Surfing on Hawaii's famous Sunset Beach. The 28-year-old outdueled 11-time world champ Kelly Slater in the semi-finals before defeating Portugal's Frederico Moraes and American Story Meister and Tanner Guduascas in the final heat to earn the win. Smith will remain third in the overall 2016 World Surf League rankings behind leader John Florence and second place Gabriel Medina. The upcoming Billabong Pipe Master, the final event of the Vans Triple Crown of Surfing, is the only remaining event in which surfers can score championship tour points. A top Qatari soccer official said security at the 2022 World Cup should be top-notch. During a Soccerex event in Doha, Nasser Al-Khatir said Qatar has learned from incidents at Euro 2016, adding that security personnel look at things differently now and will take extreme security measures. Former Spain international Xavi Hernandez, who now plays in Qatar, said the 2022 World Cup will be an extraordinary event, and with 6 years to go, we can expect perfection. He also said that moving the tournament to winter was the right idea. And finally, relatively cold conditions prevail in hilly areas, while it will be mild in other parts of the kingdom. Tomorrow, a slight rise in temperature is expected, but it will remain chilly with southeasterly moderate winds. Highs in Amman and the northern areas are expected to reach 17 degrees Celsius. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a relatively warm day tomorrow, while winds will be northerly moderate and the seas slightly high. We now to the temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. The Supreme Commander joins officers at a joint military drill by Jordanian and German forces. The European Union election observers say Jordan's parliamentary polls are well administered and inclusive. And Syrian government forces advance further into eastern Aleppo, where the UN warns food supplies are running low. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Halia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.